Chapter 12. Wolf stuffed his jacket pockets with the food, pushing the sandwiches in hard and squishing the biscuits on top. He couldn't believe Jim would scoff at his idea of criminals loose in the remote bush. It spoke volumes that he was okay to send Wolf off alone, but he wouldn't trust him with his precious hunting knife. It lay on the ground between them, and for a brief moment, Wolf toyed with the idea of snatching it up anyway. Drug dealers aren't interested in you, Jim said. He'd opened his eyes and was watching Wolf. He leaned forward and casually scooped the knife up as if he was a mind reader. Anyway, they'd have guns and you'd be finished off before you could get the pig knife out of its sheath. Whatever, it was an emergency thing. Drug dealers were just an example. Wolf zipped the truck keys into the pouch on his hood and put the torch with its elastic band on his head. He picked up the crappy compass and put it in the front pocket of his shorts. The water bottle he rested on the rock beside the pig. I'd better get going. Come on, Tag. It felt good to give a command, but Tag didn't move. Get in behind, Tag, he said more loudly, but the stupid dog stood up and went to stand by Jim. He won't go with you unless I give the order. Dogs can only have one master. Give the order then if you want him to come with me. I don't care. I think you should take him. He's a smart dog and he could be useful. Jim rubbed Tag's ears and pulled him around to chat. You've got more work to do and you'd better look out for our young friend. Ralph, meanwhile, slid his head along the ground and rolled his eyes around in his big swollen face, watching the Tag scene. Wolf felt like rolling his eyes too, as Tag was only a dog and scarcely going to be much help. Off you go, Tag. Keep him safe. Go. Jim pushed Tag in Wolf's direction, and Tag came and stood beside Wolf. Good boy, Wolf said, and ran his hand over Tag's head. I'm sorry you have to walk on your own. I wish things were different. Wolf looked at his uncle sitting propped up against the tree with his sick dog and his few supplies and knew he would hate to be the one staying behind. It's not your fault. I'll do my best, but you better know I'm not the hero type. Wolf wanted to shut up, but the next bit came out as someone had clapped him on the back and made him keep speaking. I was scared about coming hunting, and now I'm scared about going back alone. Jim nodded as if he knew exactly. It takes guts to admit you're afraid. The fact you are afraid but still prepared to go makes you a hero type. Wolf shrugged. I don't have a choice. We all have choices. I think I'm in good hands. Jim leaned back on the tree trunk and shut his eyes again, as if he was exhausted. Wolf put his hands on the pig's front legs and shuffled himself around so that it could hoist it onto his back. Jim must have opened his eyes because he said, Hey, leave that. It's enough you walking out without lugging the pig. I can do it, Wolf said. He had thought about Davy and remembered him lying in hospital with his eyes shut. Get me a pig, he had said, and Wolf knew there was no way he was going to leave his precious prize behind. It seemed as if Davy's welfare depended on not just the deliverance of the tusks, but the pig as well. No way. Your first priority is to rescue me. The pig will slow you up. It's crazy to walk it out. I'll dump it if I can't manage. I want to take him. Wolf threaded his arms through the pig and looked straight at Jim. I have to take him. Jim narrowed his eyes as if he was witnessing something weird. First you don't want to touch the pig and now you can't bear to leave it behind. You'll say I'm stupid, but I've got this feeling that if I take the pig, then Davy will be okay. Jim nodded. Like an omen. Dunno, maybe. Well, you're certainly superstitious enough to be a hunter. Promise me you'll park the pig if it gets too much. I don't want to perish because you're too stubborn to let it go. I promise. Wolf hoisted the pig up onto his shoulders. It was like slipping on a stinky, prickly jacket that weighed a ton. Wolf nodded at Jim. There was nothing more to say about it. The pig settled into the hollows in his shoulders that it had already carved. It hurt a lot, but Wolf wanted to look in control, a man with a spring in his step. Wolf and Jem looked at each other and Jem said, "Good luck." As Wolf turned and began to walk, he noticed his legs had seized up and he had to concentrate on making each step. There was a long ridge to follow before he was out of sight, and he could feel Jem's eyes on his back the whole time. The ground was lumpy with snaking tree roots, which meandered at different angles, waiting to trip him up. He didn't want to stumble like a novice, so he watched his feet carefully. It was a relief to finally dip out of sight and veer to the left as he followed the contour of the hill. He'd walked stolidly for a long time, his brain in neutral, finding his groove before he remembered that he was supposed to count the steps every time he wasn't heading north. He stopped and looked back, his heart pounding. "Come on," he told himself. He figured he'd done about 100 steps, but as he set off again, doubt settled over him. Maybe it was less than that. Downhill was always quicker. He decided to go a 75 and he cursed himself for forgetting the basics so early. The time was crucial as well, and he wondered how the hell people figured these things out without cell phones. Wolf felt a wave of panic as he tried to remember the whole east-west thing. He stared up at the sun burning behind the clouds. It wasn't above him, it was sort of at 10 o'clock, he thought, and suddenly it made sense. He noticed his shadow was not as long as his body length, but perhaps 3/4 of it. Tag was able to lie comfortably in his shade and pant. "Come on, boy," he said. "This track has taken us too far west." And Jem said to go north. "I think we need to go cross-country. What do you reckon?" Tag seemed to think it was a good idea, so Wolf stepped off the edge and began to slither down the bank with the pig dragging and lurching behind him. He jumped, slid and clambered down and down until he knew he couldn't stop even if he wanted to. The massive hill finally tapered out, and Wolf was able to slow up and come to a halt. The back of his hand was bleeding where it had scraped a rock, but otherwise he had survived the downhill, and some of it had been fun. Boris, on his back, had cushioned a few knocks, but caused a few as well. Wolf stared up at the peaks surrounding him. He was filled with uncertainty. Was he right coming down here, or had he made things harder? He thought about the road where the truck was parked and remembered that it was quite high. It wasn't the top of a hill, but it sure as hell wasn't a gully. Fear prickled his skin. He yelled at Tag, who was trying to sniff the pig behind him. "Get out of there, you filthy piece of dirt." Tag scarpered. What to do? It would be a waste of energy to panic and climb back up after dropping so far, and at least his path downhill was going north. Wolf had a mouthful of warm water from the bottle and kept going. At the bottom of the hill, the terrain became a mass of white boulders like a tipped and shaken bag of marshmallows. At first, as Wolf clambered over one boulder and walked around a second, he thought it was a small area, but eventually he began to realise the extent of the spill. The chalky, warm boulders seemed to go for miles. "Where the hell are we, Tag?" It didn't look like anything like the land they'd walked over that morning. Tag's tongue hung out of his mouth, and there was a froth around his gums and teeth. Wolf and Davy had never been allowed a dog, so Wolf wasn't sure if a frothy mouth was normal. He leaned the pig into a boulder to take the weight off his shoulders and dragged the biscuits out of his pocket to share. They'd been dry and hard when he and Jem had eaten them before the slaughter, but now they were a crumbly, desiccated mess, and they sucked all the moisture from his mouth. "We need water, Tag." And Wolf unscrewed the lid and had a swig. Liquid gold. It was hard to give Tag a drink without spilling any, so, in the end, Wolf put a few drops into the lid and held it out for Tag to lap. He gave him 3 lid amounts and then shut it away. "Sorry, boy, we're rationing." Tag gave a dog shrug and pissed against a clump of gorse. Wolf heaved the pig back up and checked out the sun again. He reckoned it was 3 o'clock. "Which way?" he asked, but Tag had gone. He'd disappeared into the eerie landscape. "Tag, get here." His voice echoed around the hills, bouncing and mocking. Get here, you stupid half-wit mongrel. The sun slid behind the clouds and the light dimmed as suddenly as a fading cell phone screen. Wolf tried not to let it spook him, but the dimmed light felt ghostly. "Come on, Tag. I'm sorry," I yelled. "Get in behind." There was no sign of Tag, and Wolf made himself stay calm. Tag will come back, he thought. The pig seemed heavier than ever, and Wolf had no idea of his direction. He was too old to cry, but his voice quavered as he begged Tag to return. "Tag, Tag, please, Tag." Why had he insisted on this trip? He remembered his parents' horror at the idea, and he knew that their revulsion had egged him on. What was the big deal about pig hunting or any hunting? It was a hard slog and dangerous, just as his mother had predicted. He and Davy had turned the pegs on Mum's cello once, for the hell of it, to see which string would stretch the most. They set off on the count of 3 and wound at the same pace. Both strings snapped simultaneously, and Davy's string had whipped Davy's arm, drawing blood. The bridge and soundpost had collapsed from the pressure, and the other 2 strings had lain slack on the belly of the cello. It had been an expensive repair job. Wolf imagined his parents living like those stretched strings, and he knew that if he didn't get out of this wilderness, the stress of him getting lost would snap his parents as surely as it had snapped the cello strings.